What if I told you that you could take ice cream anywhere you wanted and you didn't have to keep it ice cold or in a freezer? If you want to know how, then follow me to my top secret location where I make this all happen.
Now we're just outside my commercial kitchen that I rent, and if you're not familiar with running a freeze drying business, you probably need to know that one, you can run your business as a cottage food operator out of your home, shop, garage, wherever you really want to. And usually states have a cottage food law, which means that you can run it out of your home and you can sell homemade goods. But if you want to expand your product line to TCS type items, it's called temperature controlled substance type items, where you have to have either keep it cold like ice cream, or you have to keep it hot where you've cooked something. That's where the local health district is going to maintain its specific regulations for certain types of businesses, and that's where you have to have a commercial kitchen. Now you can rent that, or you can pay for one and have your own lease spot and pay for all that equipment. But probably the cheapest option that you can do to kind of get yourself immersed in commercial freeze drying is to rent a space like I have right here. And you can find places even with local churches or schools or bars, restaurants, even a commissary, which is a shared commercial kitchen you can find, where you can rent that, keep your freeze dryer there. And the way you find those places is you just actually have to call and ask and email and even contact maybe that health district rep and ask them, hey, do they have any shared commercial kitchens that they are aware of that have that license that you can go rent at? So let's go ahead and go into the commercial kitchen, and I'll share with you about how to freeze dry ice cream. Hey, before we start the freeze drying process, if you are new to this channel, please hit the subscribe bell. I'd love for you to join the freeze drying business community. And also, if you're loving this content, you love freeze dried ice cream, or you just love freezing in general, hit that like and that thumbs up on this video, and that way it gets sent out to the algorithm and make sure everyone else sees this video. Now, I gotta tell you, I am from Boise, Idaho. That's why I'm wearing and representing the Boise State Broncos, home of the Smurf turf. It's a blue field. If you're not familiar with college football, Gene Blameyer, he said, hey, for marketing purposes and for Boise State to get more out there in the nation, let's go with something that we can really transform the field to. And so he decided to purchase a blue AstroTurf, and now we always are grandfathered into having a colored field. That's the history of Boise State having a blue field, and I'm proud to be a Boise State Bronco.
All right, so let's get the freeze dryer settings set up. Now, if you've got the Harvest Right freeze dryer or another brand of freeze dryer, this is the settings that I would always do with freeze drying ice cream, no matter what type of brand you have. We're gonna press customize. We're gonna have the initial freeze be at -10 degrees. You can even go lower than that, but you really don't need to. I just tend to go with -10 just to make sure the ice cream is super frozen. Now, the dry temp is what's important right here. So we need to do the dry mode at normal, and then we also need to set the dry temp to manufacturer settings at 125 degrees. So we really don't need to change that. I wouldn't go anything above that. You could definitely go below. Now, the extra dry time is more of a safety measure. I like to go anywhere between 4 to 6 hours of extra dry time. You can set that baby up to be as long as you want to, but I just stick with 6 hours. We're gonna press save. All right, now that the vacuum chamber is cooling, we're gonna wait for this temperature in the chamber to be under 30 degrees. I usually am more conservative, so I like to make sure that the temperature is well below 20 degrees. So that's what we're gonna wait for the chamber to get cooled down to, and then we'll start scooping the ice cream.
So while that chamber freezes, I'm gonna talk about the process that I found to be the most successful with making sure that you're freeze drying ice cream in the appropriate way, and also getting it passed with your commercial license so that you can start selling that freeze dried ice cream. All right, here's the 4-step process for freeze drying ice cream. If you follow these 4 steps, you're gonna be successful with freeze drying ice cream for your business or for your own personal use. So my method for freeze drying ice cream, it took a while to perfect. And what I learned a lot of is you gotta be really quick with what you're doing. So be very intentional about your time that you're taking to make sure that all of this process is completed, okay? Step number 1 is to prepare ahead of time all of the methods that you need to make this a very quick process. We already went through that. You're gonna make sure that the trays are already in the freezer, okay, so they're nice and cold. You're also gonna make sure, obviously, that the ice cream is already frozen in there. Make sure that your freezer is at -5 degrees or less if you can. That way it's just nice and hard, and it makes it last a little bit longer, as you'll see, with making sure that you're scooping a very solid scoop of ice cream onto the tray. Step number 2 is to make sure that that freeze dryer is down below 20 degrees or less, and that way when you're putting in the trays, it's already starting to freeze that ice cream that you just scooped. All right, step number 3 is to follow this process that I'm about to tell you about how to work your trays in a very sequencing order. Now, you're gonna start with one tray, it's already frozen, then you're gonna take 1.5 quart of the Tillamook ice cream or whatever size you have. You're gonna scoop all of that ice cream onto the tray. So no matter what freeze dryer you have, you're gonna go through each individual shelf and kind of do a first in, and then it's gonna be the last out, so that that first tray is freezing while you're working on the other trays following up that. And then step number 4 is you're gonna take that first tray that you did, because now it had all that time to freeze at that negative temperature that the freeze dryer is at, and now you've got a freshly frozen tray with half of it filled up with your ice cream, and now you can scoop the rest of your ice cream on that tray to get it maximized and filled up, and then you're gonna put that back in the freezer and then go back up to the rest of your shelves. I only choose Tillamook ice cream just because it's the best, so I choose my huckleberry ice cream because we're from Idaho, and Idaho is known for wild huckleberries, so I always do that. It's a really big seller. Now, the key piece of freeze drying ice cream is you want to pre-freeze your trays right here. So stick all your trays for whatever size freeze dryer you have, put them in the freezer, and make sure you're freezing these for at least 1 to 2 hours to get them nice and cold, because you're going to have a very limited time to scoop all the ice cream and put them on a cold tray. So make sure you do that first. That's very important. All right, as you can see here, it's at 31 degrees. That's the temperature of the chamber right now. I've got the door closed, and I'm not closing the drain valve right now. That's because if I'm trying to open it, it actually could create a little bit of suction. So you don't want to like close the drain valve or anything like that. Just keep it shut. And so it's been running for almost 44 minutes. It's going to take about an hour for it to get down to that 20 degrees, but that's okay. So no matter what, again, you're doing, just try to find something else to do in your business while you're here at the kitchen or while you're at home, and wait for this thing to cool down to 20 degrees. All right, so freeze drying as a business is different for every single state. Some things are very consistent, and most of the things that I talk about on my channel are very general in terms of, hey, if you want to freeze dry lemon heads, if you want to freeze dry fruit, you can go ahead and do that pretty much in any state. The difference is where you do it. Now, I'm in a commercial kitchen, so I have a food establishment permit to run my freeze drying business, and I can run what they call TCS food. So I can run temperature controlled types of food items that would be different than a cottage food operator. That's what I started in. A cottage food operator could only do things like candy in the state of Idaho, fruit, and a couple other different items. So anything that has to be more temperature controlled, for example, ice cream, or something that needs to be kept hot or has been cooked, you couldn't do that in a cottage food operation. Now, some states might be more flexible. You might be able to do more in the cottage food side, and also other states might be more strict. Now, once you have a commercial kitchen, you can submit a menu and show them exactly what you're going to be doing. And when you're doing freeze-dried ice cream, one of the things that I had to prove was the activity level for moisture in the freeze-dried ice cream once it was done. And what I did is I took it down into an independent laboratory and had my freeze-dried ice cream tested. I took down every single flavor. I had 4 at the time, and then I also took down my freeze-dried ice cream sandwiches. And they actually give you the water activity for the ice cream that's freeze-dried. Now, every state might have a different guideline for what moisture activity they're going to allow, but for the state of Idaho, it had to be under a certain amount of levels, and so I had that result done, and I still kept all these lab results from 2021. Now, every year when they give me the food establishment review and they come and see my process at this kitchen that I'm at right now, I actually ask them, do you need to see the lab results for the freeze-dried ice cream? Even though maybe in that day I was doing strawberries or candy to show them what I was doing, because sometimes they just randomly drop by. But they said, no, we don't need to see that. But I always have it handy in case they do. And if they needed me to update it, most of these lab results for each individual type of test is about 20 bucks. So you're really not out that much, considering this is going to allow you to freeze dry and then sell a lot of items that other people in cottage food wouldn't be able to do. All right, so what type of tools do you need to freeze dry ice cream? Well, it's actually very basic. What you're going to need is a cup of water or something so that you can make sure that you're getting a solid scoop and it's not too hard or compact, and water will really help with that. That way also you can rinse off your scoops. Now, speaking of the scoop, this is a stainless steel cookie scooper, and it actually is a size 100. I don't really know what that means. I know it's less than an ounce in size that you're gonna actually get in volume, but these you can find in links below in the video description. Also, you can just type into Google and look for a stainless steel cookie scooper 100 and you'll find one of these there. I usually have 2 of them just so I can rotate between. I'm probably just gonna stick with the huckleberry ice cream this time around, but if I was gonna go to different flavors, you'd probably wanna have multiple different glasses of water so that you're not mixing the different flavors in the same water. But because I'm going to just do huckleberry, then I can just use the same one. Now you do want to get some gloves if you have them on hand, but I pretty much like having the gloves just so I don't get all the milk and the ice cream on my hands, and I can just go to town and start scooping the ice cream really fast, which I'm going to show you. Now it comes time. This is the big show. So we got to be very quick when we take out this tray that's already frozen, as well as the ice cream. We're going to go to town. I love that term. And we're gonna start scooping all that half quart of Tillamook ice cream onto the tray. Again, this tray is frozen, and I've done this process enough to where you have enough time to get all this ice cream out of here. Now, I do need to get on some gloves, and this just allows you to just not get that ice cream on there. I'm not trying to make it too intimidating for you, but you do need to work very quickly so that you make sure you're maximizing the coldness of your tray and the ice cream. Okay, so let's get started. Now, sometimes this ice cream is actually soft enough to where you can just scoop it right on the tray. And I like having a table that's low enough like this so I'm not having to reach like this and scoop. That really is hard on the wrist. So the little bit lower of the table you can make it, the better. Now I'm gonna just do this quart and talk a little bit. So if you want to fast forward, you can, but I'm just gonna do this quart, talk about the ice cream, and then I'll show you me putting it in the tray. And then I'll put a little time lapse, show you all the different trays in there so you don't have to watch me scoop everything. As you can see, you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 scoops vertically on this tray. And then we're just gonna go down the line. And I keep these as compact as possible so that you can maximize how much you're getting on the tray. This is still pretty hard ice cream right now, so I don't really need to use the water. If it was really hard, for example, I like doing chocolate peanut butter ice cream from Tillamook. That can be a little bit harder of an ice cream. So I will go and use the water to kind of soften up my scooping so I'm not having to dig too hard. Huckleberry ice cream is super delicious. Whether you've had huckleberry jam or you've had any type of huckleberry flavored vodka or anything like that, it's really delicious. So I try to make sure that I have every scoop hitting some type of that puree that's in this ice cream. As you can see now, it's only been maybe a minute or two, but I've been able to do 4 vertical rows right now, or vertical columns. Now, if you're wondering how much I paid for ice cream, and then let's talk about the pricing for ice cream. Now, it is a high value product because look how much labor I'm going into putting into doing this. I charge $12 for about 3 ounces net of freeze-dried ice cream. Now in my bags, I can fit about probably 14 to 15 of these individual scoops because they don't really expand that much. So we're getting down to the last little bit of these 1.5 quarts. And I'll tell you something, it gets softer as you go. As soon as it becomes a little bit too melty, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. See how it's kind of melting right here? This is not a good scoop. So I'm gonna kind of dump it back and see if I can get something a little bit harder in the last little bit, which I did. It is a judgment call. So I'm done now. I'm gonna place this ice cream here. We're done with this quart. And now we're gonna put this tray into the freeze dryer. Okay? Now scooping that half of that tray took about maybe 3 to 4 minutes. So multiply that by 2, you're looking at about probably 7 to 8 minutes per tray to fill it up with freeze-dried ice cream. So it is about an hour-long process to scoop everything. Also, you got to remember your wrist can get a little bit tired too, which mine does. So this is a very tedious process. But I'm going to scoop the rest of the ice cream. I'll show you what it looks like putting it all in, and then I'll show you what the process looks like for getting this first tray out that we just did. right, all 5 trays are in. Now it's time for the second phase of this, which we're gonna take that first tray that we did on the bottom shelf, we're gonna bring it back out here, we're gonna load it up with as much ice cream as we can fill it. That way we maximize the capacity and the production out of this freeze dryer for all the ice cream that we've done. If you're excited about freeze drying ice cream and you like this video so far, please give it a thumbs up. It's really gonna help me and the video for future people who are gonna be searching for how to freeze dry ice cream or just wanna know what freeze dried ice cream is all about. I'd really appreciate it. All right, so we're gonna get the ice cream out first out of the freezer. Now we're gonna get the tray out of the freeze dryer, and we're probably gonna end up using this entire 1.5 quart again. Take this time right now and subscribe to this channel because I'm really hoping that this community really connects itself together in the future. That could happen this year as of this video, it could happen in future years, but I really want you guys all who are watching this, who love freeze drying and have a business, or if you just want to love the freeze drying industry, follow along. All the people that are watching this, I'd love to connect with you, and also leave a comment if you have a different process for freeze drying ice cream, or if you have questions, please let me know. I do try to do my best to answer the comments as best as I can. All right, as you can see, I'm really filling up this tray. It's looking really nice. All these previous scoops already are frozen. The freeze dryer right now is at 10 degrees. So all of these are already frozen. That's why this process is really important for you to follow. Scooping this ice cream, you're putting a lot of pressure on your hand and your wrist. If you have pain on your wrist, you're just not gonna be able to do freeze dried ice cream yourself. Now you could hire other people if you want to, but it is taxing on the hand. I do my ice cream in my freeze-dried business for a limited time. I only do 4 flavors. I do huckleberry, chocolate peanut butter, cookies and cream, and then strawberry ice cream. They seem to just always be what people want. Sometimes I will venture out and I'll do the orange vanilla cream Tillamook ice cream that comes out sometimes. Now I'm not gonna do a full tray's worth of all 5 just because I actually really don't have that much time right now. As of this video that I'm recording, it's like 10:30 at night. It's my only time to get videos done. It's late. I don't really feel like getting too much less sleep given I have some young kids. So now this is a fully loaded tray. This is gonna produce at least 8 to 10 bags of ice cream. So, you know, that's gross sales wise, that's $100 to $120 tray right there of freeze dried ice cream, given that I'm charging $12 retail. That's not the wholesale prices that I give, but that's freeze dried ice cream. Now, if you are new to freeze drying or you want to buy a freeze dryer, I'd really appreciate if you use the affiliate link for Harvest Dried or Stay Fresh in the links below in the video description. I own both of those freeze dryers. My preferred freeze dryer is the Harvest Dried as of this video because they offer the largest freeze dryers right now to produce the most capacity. And when you're running a freeze drying business, you're gonna realize quickly either you're gonna have to increase the amount of freeze dryers that you have, or you're gonna have to upgrade to something larger so that every run produces the maximum amount of capacity. So that's the process for my successful freeze drying ice cream process. Now we're gonna let the freeze dryer do its thing. We'll come back and we'll see what the end result is. Now, when you're freeze drying ice cream and it's done with its cycle, one of the things you're gonna have to figure out is whether it's done. And the best way to do that, I found, is to do some taste testing. I haven't really had any trouble with it not drying properly, especially in my Harvest Dried freeze dryer. So I'm gonna do a tray. We're gonna test ones that are in the middle, and we're gonna test one that's on the outsides as well, to see if it's dry with some taste testing. Now also, the freeze dryer is not quite in the defrost option. The reason I keep it at the mode right here where it says process complete is I have the option to either defrost or no defrost, or continue doing some additional final dry. So in the case that I find that the ice cream isn't done and I find some cold spots in those taste tests, then I'm gonna add more dry time, probably at least 6 to 8 hours of final dry time just to be sure. And then you can take them back out and do another taste test. So that's why I keep it in this mode and I don't immediately go to the defrost mode, so that I can put it back into the final dry. Hey, before we do the taste test, if you are interested in freeze drying more products, I want to show you the next video that I'm going to be doing, which is how to freeze dry ice cream sandwiches. In that video, I show you exactly the type of brand to buy. I show you how to prepare it and cut it up into bite-sized pieces that's perfect for selling it in your freeze-dried bags for your freeze-drying business. I'd encourage you to check out that video after this. And then also I've shared it in the video description below. Make sure you subscribe as well, and you'll be notified of more future videos that I'm going to be coming out with on how to freeze dry and how to get better at your freeze drying business. All right, let's taste test the freeze dried ice cream. So good. Super crunchy. It still has that milky type of taste to it, where you've got the milk type of ice cream flavor, and then that puree of the huckleberry just hits you again as well. This is why I love freeze dried ice cream. All right, now let's try the chocolate peanut butter. If you can see this, it still has the peanut butter in it, but it makes it a little bit creamy, and then you've got the chocolate. This is so delicious. Now with the creaminess of this peanut butter, what I typically do is I let the freeze dryer get cool enough, down to like 50, 40 degrees, just so it kind of keeps the peanut butter a little bit more compact and kind of frozen up. And then that way it's not super creamy and doesn't get on the bags, on the kind of the inside of it, and dust the bags with a little bit more peanut butter, right? So if it's already kind of compact from being somewhat, cooled down and not hot, then you don't have as much messiness when you're bagging the chocolate peanut butter type. You got to try different flavors, try things that you think would be very flavorful and impactful for your community and your customers. Have some fun with it, but that's how to freeze dry ice cream.
I think I may have stumbled upon a brand new freeze dried product that you should try in your freeze drying business, and that is to take your famous guacamole recipe and convert it into a freeze dried cube that then you can reconstitute later using water and make it just as fresh and tasting good as before. If you want to see how this is done and how you can make your own recipe using a freeze dryer, check out this video. Let's get started. Now, when you're thinking about using your freeze dryer to start a business and make some money, you got to think about a couple different things. Number one is, how is the consumer going to utilize a freeze-dried product? You could sell a freeze-dried strawberry, people could snack on it, and that's fine. But what other applications could they use for those freeze-dried strawberries? Because usually when you're baking with strawberries, you're going to use it as a puree. But with freeze drying, removing the water from a strawberry, you now have a moisture-free natural ingredient that someone can crush up into a powder and then naturally flavor it for whatever they're going to use it for. So applications within the freeze drying process has a lot of different varieties, and that's why starting a freeze drying business doesn't have to be a huge obstacle for you if you think outside the box, outside of candy and things that you're seeing a lot of on social media and different people doing. So that's the actual product side. Think about what the application would be for something that you're going to freeze dry. And the second part of all this is testing things out. You got to experiment with what the freeze dried process could produce for you. And that's why having a home freeze dryer to start out with, to experiment with different recipes, you can really hone in how you want to actually present that end product to the consumer. Do you actually want it to be some type of snack that's freeze dried as is, or do you want it to be something where they reconstitute it, where, let's say for fresh guacamole, someone is on the go, they're backpacking, camping, they're traveling in the air, and they can't actually store fresh guacamole. No need to bring a knife or things like that you need to cut all these different ingredients up. You can just add water and then have fresh, natural, organic type of guacamole on the go. So as you can see, there's opportunities with creating a different recipe that is freeze-dried. You just need to figure out what avenue to go. Let's make some fresh guacamole. Now, the recipe that I'm going to use is my mom's recipe, which includes cilantro, tomato, avocados, red onion, lime juice, and the ranch seasoning that you can buy at the store. We're gonna use a mortal and pestle today because I make a lot of guacamole for different family meals, and so I bought this and it was a worthwhile investment because it crushes everything up. You can use whatever you want. You can use a bowl, fork, whatever you use to make sure all the ingredients are put together. And after we make the fresh guacamole, I'm gonna share with you how I'm gonna arrange it on my freeze dryer trays to make them perfect serving size once they get freeze dried. Now, I don't have an exact measurement of all the different ingredients, so you're not gonna really see, 1 teaspoon of this. I usually do guacamole to taste. If you're really wanting to fine tune your recipe, obviously you can do the measurements yourself, and that way when you're gonna do a business out of it, you know exactly what can be consistently freeze dried for that same taste. What my mom told me, I'm no fancy cook, but what she told me, if you can see right here, is to kind of bunch up your cilantro, and that way when you do cut it, it cuts all the leaves and the little stems perfectly, and you don't actually have to cut up each individual leaf too much. Now what we're gonna do some of the onion. You know, with red onion, now with it being fresh, it provides a little bit more of that crunch, and it also adds just a little bit more of kind of a kick to it, and adds a little bit more flavor. So that's why we're gonna do red onions. Now, what I usually do with my guacamole kind of cadence is I don't ever put like the actual tomato in here yet, because I want to make it and grind it up with some of the harder ingredients, and then I'll put the tomato in the last, just because that way it's not completely smashed into the recipe. I like cutting up these avocados into little squares even within the skin. You don't have to do that. You could just put the whole avocado in there, obviously scooping it out from the skin. Call me OCD, this is what I've always done, and it takes a little bit longer, but it just makes it smaller pieces. We're gonna see for the first time. I've never done freeze-dried guacamole, but we're gonna do that today, and we're gonna see how we can kind of reconstitute it so that it tastes the same. I'm sure it's gonna taste the same because, I mean, all the flavor is still in here, and the great thing about freeze-drying is that it keeps the highest level of nutritional value in whatever you're freeze-drying, upwards of 90% typically. And the seasoning that I use for guacamole is this ranch seasoning. You can use, you know, natural things like salts and things like that, but I use the ranch seasoning just because, I don't know, there's something different about how it tastes. All right, there's all the tomatoes, putting that in there. I usually do 1 Roma tomato per 3 avocados. I don't do any more than that, just because unless people really love a ton of tomatoes, I don't do that. So we'll just use a spoon to mix it all up. Look how awesome that is. Now with the lime juice, I just kind of do a couple squirts. I don't do too much. That's probably more of like a half a teaspoon or so. After I get done with that, I'll just put a little bit more ranch seasoning in. That should be all the ingredients. So let's give it a good taste. Oh yeah, that's good. All right, so how are we gonna freeze dry this? Well, for one, what you see in front of me, this is one of the silicone molds that Harvest Right has, and you can buy off their site on harvestright.com. Now, I've got a couple of these that they sent me when I bought one of my freeze dryers several years ago, so you can buy them on their website. And what I like about these different molds is that it puts it in these little bite-sized cubes here. And think about it in the business side of things. So if you just need somebody for backpacking and they just want a couple of cubes just to get a couple of good savoriness to whatever they're cooking on their camping trip, they don't need huge blocks of Mylar bags of guacamole, right? They just need a couple cubes. So it gives you an opportunity to look at small serving sizes, but also look at the way you're gonna present the guacamole cubes as well, because you want it to be presentable when someone actually opens up the bag or uses it. And I kind of think of it being similar to a cube of chicken bouillon, you know, where you drop that little cube in and it dissolves in the hot water in the microwave or in boiling water. That's kind of what I'm envisioning these little cubes of guacamole to be that are freeze dried, is something that's very manageable to put in a packet and then reconstitute. So in order to kind of get those serving sizes, I'm gonna add all this guacamole to this bowl, and then we'll weigh it. That way we know how much guacamole we're gonna put into this tray. All right, now we've got all the guacamole in there. Let's put it back onto the scale, and 470 grams. I'm writing that on a piece of paper just so we know for reference. And then once we freeze dry this, we'll know what type of moisture was removed from it, because I'm assuming it's gonna lose the weight of that lime juice and the avocado juice and tomato juice, things like that. All right, so to make things easy, I'm just gonna put all this guacamole on the cubes. I don't really care where it's going, like in the middle or whatever, because the freeze dryers of today's world, like, they're smart enough to where they just sense all the moisture that's in whatever you're putting in there. So it doesn't really matter whether it's on the edges or whatever, but we're obviously gonna wanna check for dryness once we get done. But this is kind of just what I'm doing. I've actually done, for my freeze drying business, I've done some testing for different people where I just say, hey, send me your yogurt recipe, or as people talk to me about different things that they want to test. And that's part of having a freeze dryer and having a freeze drying business. There's a lot of ways for you to grow a business and make money. I am kind of pressing firmly on these cubes because I want to make sure that there's not like air in the middle. I want it firmly pressed because I really want to try to get a firm cube out of each individual square. Looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 6, so we've got 30 different cubes. Perfect. Well, there you have it, fresh guacamole made with fresh ingredients. Now it's time to freeze dry it. So the freeze dryer process actually can pre-freeze your food and then freeze dry it, taking out all the moisture, going through that process of sublimation. But what you can do is speed up the whole freeze drying cycle time by pre-freezing your food. So if you're new to freeze drying, you can do that. Just find a stand-up freezer, put it in your home freezer, and you can kind of save 5 to 6 hours of what the freeze dryer would freeze it for, and that way you're just going straight to the freeze drying cycle process. I'm gonna put these tray lids for my Harvest Right on here. This is made by freezedryingsupplies.com. And what I love about these tray lids is they've got these raised edges, as you can see right here. These allow you to stack more and more trays on top of here, even with the tray lids. And that's kind of different than having the actual tray stackers on the edges. This prevents a little bit more of that susceptibility to freezer burn, other types of things maybe getting exposed to your fresh product here. So if you want to buy these, you can go to the video description and go to freezedryingsupplies.com. I've got a link below in the video description. You can use my affiliate link. Once this is pre-frozen for 5 to 6 hours, I'm going to then activate my freeze dryer settings. And what we're going to try to do that at for testing purposes is we're going to do it at the factory temp of 125 degrees. I'm going to set the pre-freeze temp at -15, initial freeze down to just maybe 2 or 3 hours. That's just because I've already pre-frozen it, but that just adds a little bit more of a safeguard to it. All right, don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're gonna see what fresh guacamole looks like freeze-dried. We're gonna do some taste testing, as well as see what it looks like texture-wise, and also gonna do some reconstitution with some water to see if we can get it back to this original state with the same great taste that we have today. While we wait for the freeze dryer to do its thing, you can support this channel and my efforts with the freeze drying industry in 2 ways. Number one is like or subscribe to this channel. That'll really help more and more of my videos get to more people to help them in their freeze drying journey. And number two is you can do something completely free, which is join my email list of freeze drying entrepreneurs and people interested in the freeze drying space. And you can be really connected with what's happening in the freeze drying industry. So if you want to be more connected to this channel, go to the video description down below and click on freezedriedbusiness.com. You'll see a pop-up that pops up to enter your email, and then I'll send you a welcome email with also my ROI spreadsheet to calculate what type of ROI and profit you can generate from a freeze drying business. So thanks a lot. Let's get back to see what the freeze dryer did to the guacamole. All right, the freeze dried cycle is done. I'm really excited to show you what the finished freeze dried guacamole cube looks like. So let's take a look at the finished product here. All right, take a look at this. So as I get the molds out and pop out these different cubes, this is a Harvest Right logo because that's what they have the molds for, but as you can see, it stayed pretty intact. Now let's put this on the counter and just give it you some perspective. Take a look at that. You can see the cilantro that I put in there. You can even see some of the tomato that I put in there. It all freeze dried together, and it's actually very light. I don't want to crush this because we're going to use it for simple purposes, but it's really not that heavy. Look at that. Even the red onion is in there. Okay, so let's take all of this out of the tray and let's weigh it total, because I've actually got my nifty little piece of paper that we did initially, and it was 470 grams of gross product, the gross guacamole weight. So let's go ahead and weigh all the freeze-dried cubes and then see how it comes out and how much water it lost. Okay, now here's the fun part about freeze drying. And if you're wanting to start a freeze drying business, this is kind of the fun experimentation and the research side of testing out different products. What we're testing out is, can we freeze dry guacamole, fresh guacamole that we mix up with the different ingredients? I would say that yes, check. We have made freeze-dried guacamole. Second part of that is we want to see how much weight it lost, because we want to see, one, how can we package it up to give a certain amount of serving size. We also want to be able to calculate how much actual gross product do we need to make if we were going to make this at scale, because if we're running a business or we're trying to see if we can market this better, then we would actually want to see how much product we can produce in one batch of guacamole. Third part is going to be, what can we do with reconstitution for our freeze-dried guacamole, because we took the water out through the freeze dryer process. So if I put a cube into this bowl and then I put maybe a teaspoon of water, is that how much water it lost in here, or do we need to put a little bit more water in there? So let's first actually weigh the bowl, and that way we can tear it off. And we're doing this in grams like we did initially, and start loading them into the bowl. I've already put 6 in here and it's only reached 18 grams. So a lot of weight has been removed through the freeze drying process for all of these guacamole cubes. And you see how, you know, there's a little bit of shavings that is over the top because the cube went in here. If you were gonna sell this, what I would do is, obviously I don't want that overhanging look and feel. So I would kind of clean this up and make sure the cubes look very presentable. If you watched a lot of my videos, I'm kind of a perfectionist in this way, in that like, I just really look at how the product looks versus immediately just like, hey, did it work, and put it in the package. So I want it to be high quality, both on looks and taste. 90 grams total. So 470 grams is what we started with. And then now we reduce that all the way down to 90 grams. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on the reconstitution part. I don't actually do a whole lot of reconstitution, so we're gonna kind of experiment in just my own way, but you can obviously go through a lot more in-depth research on figuring out exactly you know, how much water weight you lost in the product, and then figuring out backwards math, you know, how much you should put back into a given product. So what I'm gonna do is, I know we had 470 grams of guacamole before we freeze dried it. And after that, we just weighed it, and now we have 90 grams net, which means that we lost 380 grams of water weight from the guacamole. So in my nifty little phone here, I put 380 grams into an ounce conversion, and it came out with that it's 13.4 ounces. All right, now I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm gonna ask Siri how many tablespoons are in 1 ounce, because now we can actually do the calculation of seeing how much the conversion is of tablespoons to ounces. So let's ask her. How many tablespoons is in 1 ounce?
The answer is 2 tablespoons.
Okay, if you didn't hear that, she said 2 tablespoons. So we have 10 cubes, and we did 30 cubes total. So we can make basically an ounce worth of guacamole reconstituted. And so now we're gonna put 2 tablespoons of water into this bowl. And this should be the amount that we remove. And all we're gonna do now with the cubes now is we're just gonna kind of mix this up. It's getting a lot more into more of kind of that chunkiness here. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm gonna go 1 more tablespoon. So 3 tablespoons to 1 ounce. And yeah, this is looking good. This actually looks just like what we originally had with our guacamole. Okay, shame on me for not having actual tortilla chips, but I've got some Ruffles in my pantry, and I'm gonna test this out and see what this reconstituted guacamole tastes like. Wow, I'm not lying. That tasted just like our fresh guacamole. I'm not doing that just for this video. Like, this is just delicious. Let me give you an idea of what I just tasted. Texture was the same as the fresh guacamole. Tasted creamy. There wasn't any kind of chunkiness to it. I can taste the red onion. I can taste the avocados great. I have a little bit more of that saltiness that's in there. That's what I tasted as well. You know, the only thing that it was different was, you know, there wasn't a ton of crunch from the fresh red onion, which is okay. This tasted awesome. All right, we're done with the taste test and everything. I don't know about you, but I really was thrilled with the way this all turned out. So let's talk about the business end of freeze drying guacamole. So number one is, I think in default, having this product freeze dried as is and having it as a snack, like a freeze dried strawberry or freeze dried ice cream scoop, that's not gonna be the selling point. I would go with the reconstitution idea. And just like with any business, once you have a product, you need to figure out who your target audience is and what type of marketing language and words you can actually use to tell people why they would want to have a freeze-dried guacamole cube and reconstitute it versus having fresh. And again, if you want to start a freeze-drying business, this is the next phase of this industry. A lot of people freeze-dry candy. A lot of people are kind of used to having and seeing freeze-dried Skittles, freeze-dried everything, right? So now we have to raise it to the next level. Freeze-drying is not a fad. Freeze-drying is not going away. But what is going to go away is the newness of a product. Once everyone's experienced having a freeze-dried Skittle, it's not as new anymore. And so now you have to kind of change things up. So how can you make a freeze-dried product and market it as something that you can call it your own? So speaking to the person who is looking at the freeze-drying industry space and seeing a lot of different chatter online about this market being very saturated, you're only hearing that from people who have basically kind of had a great success with the newness of freeze-dried candy, and really they just went in there with no idea really what their business is about. This is really going to define you. This type of recipe and research and experimentation with freeze-drying processes is really going to take you to another level and really going to probably give you a lot more confidence going into this so that you know what you're kind of going to be doing with the freeze dryer. And if you want to learn more about freeze drying and how to prepare different things for your freeze drying business, check out the next couple videos. I'll see you there.
And today I'm going to be using my potato slicer to cut my apples into fries, so they're bite-sized pieces that are really fun to look at. But this time I'm gonna drizzle caramel over top of the apples. And caramel in the freeze dryer, as some of you know, or if you're new to freeze drying, it pops and changes its texture from chewy to crunchy. And so we're gonna experiment to see if the freeze-dried apples and the caramel creates a really tasty, crunchy bite. Now I'm doing this video and this recipe in my kitchen today just so I could test it out to see how it actually turns out. But I wanted to show you the fry slicer. Now this is linked in my video description of this video, as well as you can check out the freeze-drying apples video that I produced. But normally you put a potato in this area and then you slide this lever through and it actually produces these fry slices out of here. Now I really like these because it creates more of a bite-sized bite and it creates a little bit more of a different texture than just using the ring type slicer that you're normally accustomed to seeing with cutting apples. Now I've got my 5 freeze dryer trays from the Harvest Right. I'm going to use the Harvest Right freeze dryer for this episode right now. And I'm also going to use these gridded grates from Frozen Right. They fit perfectly in the Harvest Right trays, and this just eliminates the chance that the fries will actually stick to the pan from freezing and freeze drying. So I just wanted to eliminate that. It's worked well for the strawberries so far, and now I'm going to try it out with apples. If you want to check those out, I've got a link in the description of this video. Now I've also got the Smucker's caramel, and I didn't want to go with the caramel syrup this time. I wanted it to be more of a pure caramel. Now I could have melted some caramels, but I wanted to try this for the first time with this recipe, so I'm using the Smucker's caramel flavored topping. I've also got my washed apples, both Gala and Granny Smith. So I've got all these different tools. Now let's go ahead and get the apples sliced in the fry slicer. All right, so this fry slicer is actually really easy to use. You literally put it down on the counter and it has these suction cups down below here, and that way it doesn't move because they're gonna create quite a bit of pressure getting the apple through this slicer right here to create those apple fries. All right, we've got everything in place. Let's go ahead and get to slicing the apples. This is a really great device. It creates a really slick fries, and you just, voila, you've got apple fries. Now, I do like taking out the core pieces from the apple, and you have to be quick about this just because if you're worried about browning the apples with the air. I do about 3 or 4 apples, then I take it immediately to the freezer. So what I do with these core slices right here is I just kind of set them aside because I don't want to waste them. But I'm just going to do all of about 3 or 4 Gala apples right now, right, with this fry slicer. And the reason I like the fry slicer is because it just creates some bite-sized bites. And then also with this recipe, since I'm going to be putting some caramel over it, I think it's going to be really nice to just kind of have a nice crunchy caramel base over top of it and not feel like you have to bite down on the entire apple or that kind of twirl rounded type of thing that you're normally used to doing. And when I was growing up, my mom did a lot of canning, and we went out to some orchards close to here in town where I'm at, we're in Boise, Idaho. and we used to do a lot of different prep for different types of foods. And so apples was definitely one of them, and we would use the core to do that. So we'd create these kind of circled slices. So again, I'm just setting aside the core pieces for now and just keeping kind of the nice ones that doesn't have those core areas in them. And as you can see with the tray right now, I really like this graded little grid that keeps it kind of above the freeze drying tray. And we've got plenty on here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take that Smucker's caramel and I'm gonna open it up, and I've already kind of shaken it up a little bit. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take a spoonful and I'm just gonna kind of drizzle it a little bit. Now, it is gonna create some, probably some stickiness and a mess once I have to try to actually clean this. But I wanted to just kind of take a spoon and just kind of drizzle it around because I didn't want to put too much of a layer on. I love caramel. I wanted to do enough of this so that each fry kind of got some type of caramel. So we're going to be quick about this because, like I said, I want to make sure that the apples don't get too much air to them prior to me putting them in the freezer, and then that way it kind of cuts short on the amount of freeze-dried time. So that's a good amount of caramel. I'm going to leave that there. We're going to put this in the freezer, and then we're going to do the Granny Smith apples. All right, now we're going to move on to the Granny Smith apples. This is the fun part. All right, here's the Granny Smith apples. Now that we've done all the slicing, that was 4 apples. I'm gonna take the caramel and I'm gonna kind of drizzle it. And you can be probably as generous as you want. I'm really curious how these will turn out. I think it's gonna be great because I know that caramel, if you do like Werther's caramels, or even if you do the caramel M&Ms, or you do anything, if you're new to freeze drying, caramel pops and changes its texture and makes it more crunchy. So I know it's gonna be crunchy. I'm just curious kind of how the look of it, kind of the look appeal will be with apples and then the caramel as well, because I'm still going to freeze dry these apples at 125 degrees. That's normally what I do any type of fruit at, the drying temperature. So I'm still gonna do that. Normally with candy and with caramel, I would probably do the temperature at 140 degrees because that kind of seems like the heat that you need for candy. I'm gonna do these apple trays to start at the temperature that I do for fruit instead. So we'll see how that does. Okay, so this is the Granny Smith one. I'm gonna go ahead and make my other trays. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make one other tray that doesn't have caramel on it until we pre-freeze it, and so when I take it out of the freezer, that's when I'll put the caramel on. So I'm gonna kind of see how both do with it being kind of soaked in as it freezes, and then other one as it's put on prior to freeze drying. Hey, the freeze drying process is done. Now I used my home freeze dryer, which I have this Harvest Right large freeze dryer. I've had this for a while, and I use it for experiments with different things that I'm trying in my freeze drying business, as well as this YouTube channel. The cycle time for these freeze dried caramel apple fries, it says on the screen it ran under about 40 hours, which is a little bit longer than I would have thought because ambient temperature right now at the 1st of September has been around 70, 75 degrees in my garage. In the winter time, it runs a lot shorter, so I would expect it to run about 32 hours. So the ambient temperature in your garage or your environment, wherever you're doing freeze drying, is really indicative of whether you're gonna have a quick freeze drying process or a much longer freeze drying process. So in the winter time, I see a lot more shorter cycles, maybe around 24 to 32 hours for fruit, even if I'm up to the maximum, which is around 14 to 15 pounds of fruit that I've seen done in my large Harvest Right freeze dryer. All right, so I already warmed up the tray, so now let's get the caramel apple fries out and let's do some taste tests and see how it all looks from a texture sense. All right, here's the caramel apple fries. Now, as you can see in the screen right here, the bubbles that you're seeing is the caramel, and some of it popped really high, I think just due to the amount of caramel that I put on it, and other times it kind of flies in a little bit smaller form. All right, so now the big taste test. I've never done this before, so this is the first try. Let's see how it actually tastes with caramel and a freeze-dried apple. One of these. Let's give it a taste test. Wow, that is great. Here's the caramel right here. You can actually really taste the caramel. This is actually really good. Wow, after several bites, this tastes actually really good. I can taste the caramel, it's still crunchy, and it tastes crunchy on the apples as well. Now you might be asking, what's the difference between kind of a crunchy apple that's fresh versus a crunchy apple that's freeze-dried? Well, the freeze-dried apples are really crunchy, so you kind of get two things at once. You get the crunchiness of caramel so it doesn't stick to your teeth, and you get the crunchiness of the apple. So the big difference in freeze-drying apples and the caramel is both are going to be crunchy, and it's a totally different way to enjoy caramel apples. Now I'm actually curious how this will all fit in one of my bags that I sell to customers. So let's go ahead and get one of my bags. I want to see how the caramel and the apples fit into the bag, whether it crumbles into more of a dust or if it stays intact, and how many you can actually fit in there. Okay, so now we've got the apple fries in here and in my kitchen. I did want to check to see how much, once I weigh the bags in my bag, I wanted to see how much they weigh. So I've got my scale here, and then I've got one of my bags for my business that I'm going to see how much we can fit in here. This is just for testing purposes. Now they are kind of crushing, as you can see, into a little bit more powder, so it's going to really depend on whether the caramel stuck to the outside of the apple versus these bigger bubbles that just burst. That's going to become more of the crumble, as I'm already seeing. And most of these actually do have caramel on them, so I'm going to weigh it real quick. And that comes actually, I'm going to put a couple more into, and that's an ounce. All right, so it's kind of hard to see in this camera angle, but in my window of my bags right here, you can see the caramel that is textured as more of a crunchy overlay over top of these apple fries. So this is actually looking pretty presentable, just as apples, and then people are going to wonder what's over top of it. Well, once they hit the caramel, it's going to taste really good. All right, so also I wanted to show you these grates that Frozen Right made. So as you can see, it lifts completely out of this tray, and then it kind of keeps all of your fries and fruit in one intact part, and then we can just kind of simply kind of pop them off of the tray. If you're interested in these grates, go ahead and hit up the video description, and I've got a link there to Frozen Right for you to use. Hey, a couple observations that you could do for your next batch of freeze-dried caramel apples, as well as things that I might do. If you see these larger bubbles of caramel, that just means you put a large amount of caramel on that area, which could be a nice little surprise for people that are going to bite down on that freeze-dried caramel apple. But also you could just drizzle a little bit smaller amounts too, but maybe there's just not as much of the caramel that hits. That's one thing that I did notice. So you might want to just do a bunch of them with a lot of caramel, and maybe there's not as many, but it did taste more caramel with apple, the larger amount of caramel that was actually on there. So it's really up to you. Second thing that I might do is try doing the freeze-dried apples first and then layering on the caramel and put it on candy mode at 140 degrees. And that way you can do a large batch of apples and then have that stock up, and then you could do the caramel as you start needing to bag it instead of doing it the other way. Now, I'm not quite sure if the moisture from the caramel will impact the already freeze-dried fries, but that is something maybe you might want to try. Overall though, I thought the caramel apple fries tasted really good. You definitely can taste the caramel and the apple. So try the freeze-dried caramel apple fries as you're heading into Halloween or anytime you're looking for a brand new product. Hey, if you could do me a favor, hit the like button if you're going to try the freeze-dried caramel apple fries from watching this video. Also hit subscribe if you want to see more freeze-drying videos. We'll see you next time on the Freeze Dry Business Channel. Welcome to the Freeze Dry Business Channel. My name is David and I run a freeze-drying business in Idaho. I've ran it for 4 years, and I started this YouTube channel because I wanted to bring more and more content related to freeze drying and the business side of this industry. So if you're interested in freeze drying or you're interested in starting a freeze drying business using your freeze dryer, go ahead and hit the subscribe bell. I'd love for you to join the community here, and that way you get notified of more videos. Quickly talk about freeze dryers. If you don't own a freeze dryer, I use the Harvest Right freeze dryer. I also own a Stay Fresh freeze dryer. Now if you already own a freeze dryer, then great. What you can use your freeze dryer for is either for home use with food preservation, or you can make it a business. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to experiment with different types of applications with
the freeze-dried finished product. Freeze-dried fruit, when you put it in the freeze dryer, it's going through a process called sublimation. What that does and why freeze drying is taking off is you're really preserving the highest number of nutrients in a product that you put in the freeze dryer when it comes out. And what you can do now is apply it as a powder form, because now that the pineapple, let's say, or the strawberry is dried, you can now crush it up and then, let's say, make it more of a powder over top to flavor something else. There's a lot of applications for the powder of a finished freeze-dried product. All right, enough about the science part. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video and what it's all about. Again, we're gonna powderize, that's a new term that I'm coining. We're gonna powderize 5 different fruits, and we're gonna spray the Skittles so that we can take that fruit powder and sprinkle it over the candy and the Skittles and make it more of a flavored type of Skittle, removing not necessarily the fruit taste of the chewiness of the Skittle, but kind of add strawberry plus the grape flavor of the Skittle, right? So if you're looking at doing this particular recipe, I'd suggest finding a way to crush your fruit. This is a mortar and pestle that I've got. You've probably seen this on different types of YouTube channels where people are doing it with candy. You can also see it with guacamole, obviously, but I'm just gonna use this because I use it for guacamole, and we're gonna crush it up and make it into a powder. And then you're also gonna need a spray bottle. These are really cheap. Put some purified water in it. You're obviously gonna need your Skittles, and then you're also gonna need your trays. That's really all this recipe is gonna do. Now, in the meantime, while you're doing this, you're gonna wanna set your freeze dryer to 140 degrees, and then make sure it's on high temperature mode. Now, it's gonna pre-freeze for 15 minutes. That's the process of the freeze dryer. Then we're gonna be able to turn it on high temperature mode, close the drain valve, and then put our Skittles in. So what I'm gonna get is, I'm actually gonna use a bowl like this that has 2 cups. And I'm just gonna actually put about 2 cups worth just filling up here of the pineapple, and then I'm gonna make a powder out of it using the mortar and pestle. You know, it seems like that's a lot, so maybe we'll just do an actual cup. Freeze-dried pineapple with any type of freeze-dried fruit, it just becomes a crunchy, flavorful snack. It's really delicious. And so we're gonna put this fruit into the mortar and pestle, and we're gonna just make it into a powder. So I've got a strainer. Now, the reason I'm gonna use this is I'm just gonna be able to pour some of these Skittles into here. I'm not gonna do too many Skittles because I just wanna see how this all tastes, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the spray bottle and we're gonna coat the Skittles with some water. The only reason we're doing that is not necessarily to take off all of the dye that's on for the colors, but just to get a little bit wet. And now we're gonna coat all these Skittles with pineapple. We're gonna now put it onto the tray. You see how it's kind of clumping up with the pineapple? So this is my first time doing this, and what I'm already seeing is, like, you know, it's not the same as dusting them over with chamoy or, you know, Tajin type of flavoring that you can buy. So now we're gonna do strawberries. I'm gonna change my gloves out. All right, let's go ahead and do strawberries. Now what I'm gonna do too, again, is I'm gonna do a cup of the freeze-dried strawberries. This is the great part about freeze drying, is that you get to try different things, and this is what you should be doing as a freeze-dried business. I'm taking something that we all know right now, which is a freeze-dried Skittle, and I'm just gonna take different types of flavorings from fruit and put it onto the Skittle, and that's unique, right? Have you really tasted a freeze-dried pineapple flavored Skittle? What I'm gonna do differently between the pineapple and the strawberries dust is I'm actually gonna put the Skittles already on the tray, and I'm gonna spray it with the water just lightly now. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the powder and I'm just gonna kind of put it around on top of the Skittles here. You could probably use a sifter, you know, use your hands, things like that. And all I'm doing is I'm just trying to coat all the Skittles, and then I'm gonna move the Skittles around a little bit just so it can be all around everybody. On the other three, I'm gonna do dragon fruit, mango, and papaya, and then I'll have strawberries and the pineapple. Now, before we put the things in the freeze dryer, if you could do me a favor and hit the thumbs up or the like on this video, it'd really help the video get out to more people who are interested in freeze drying and trying different things. On top of the thumbs up, make sure you check out the link in the video description because there's other videos related to freeze drying, knowing how to start a freeze drying business, tips and tricks, and also hit the notification bell so that you get notifications on my phone because I'll be doing more and more live streams to answer your questions about freeze drying. All right, let's get to the next couple of fruits and put these things in the freeze dryer. So we're going to do some taste testing from the 5 different types of infused powderized fruit Skittles that we did here. But before I do that, if you want to check out how to actually freeze dry these tropical fruits that we did, as well as some other standard fruits that I sell in my freeze drying business, and I recommend you do too, make sure you check out the thumbnails coming up at the end of this video. And I also have the video about how to freeze dry strawberries, blueberries, and pineapple. All right, let's get started with the taste test. I'm going to taste each one of these. This is going to be the first time that I've tasted them. So this is the mango, this is dragon fruit, pineapple, strawberries, and then the papaya. So let's try the mango first. After trying the mango, I had a little bit of a taste of the mango on one of the Skittles, but then it immediately hit the kind of the crunchiness and the flavor of the Skittle. So I wouldn't say that the mango actually really hit that well. I couldn't taste the fruit. All right, so as you can see with the dragon fruit, it has like the seeds within it. So let's try that. Interesting, I couldn't taste the dragon fruit right away when I crunched on it, but then the aftertaste, for some reason I may have hit 5 or 6 of these seeds, and I actually was able to taste a little bit of the tartness of the dragon fruit. So I'd say the dragon fruit definitely hit differently than the mango. I think this was better, but still not what I was anticipating. I would have liked to have had the flavor hit a little bit more heavy. So let's move on to the pineapple. All right, so here's the pineapple. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this one right here. It seems like it's coated really well with the pineapple. Wow, the pineapple, this is by far the best out of the past 2 that we've done. I can taste the pineapple immediately, and then I feel like I'm tasting the Skittle. This is definitely what I was looking for. There's a lot bigger chunks of the pineapple, so it's not as much of a powder form. There's little chunks. That might be the ticket for this, is to make it so that there's larger chunks but still small enough where it's going to coat the Skittle. All right, let's try the strawberries. Now we did this one the same way we did with the pineapple. We put it in a bowl, mixed it up. Try this one. Strawberry didn't really work that well. I couldn't even taste any part of the strawberry. I just tasted the Skittle. So papaya kind of looks like the mango as well. It's not as coated, and I don't see as big of a chunk. So this is probably going to end up being similar to the strawberry and the mango. Papaya, I didn't taste it at all. Pineapple, I'm going to say, is definitely the winner here because it really has a strong layer of the pineapple, and maybe it's just the flavor that enhances through freeze drying, and then adding it to the Skittle is clearly a big winner. So if you're going to do this, I'd say hands down you need to do the pineapple and then try other different types of fruits. And like I said at the beginning of this video, powderizing your freeze-dried fruit is a great application for trying different types of recipes. Try to use it for frosting or flavoring different types of baking goods. And don't forget to check out more of the videos coming up next. I'll see you there.